I'm Master Chief Mark Hacala. I spent 30 years in the Navy, but I've spent my whole life being intrigued by naval customs, traditions, history, heritage, and uniforms. So I'd like to share some of that enthusiasm with you using some items in my personal collection to get us started. Let's see what's in the sea chest today.
For almost 90 years, the United States Navy Ceremonial Guard has served as the Navy's Presidential Honor Guard. They have performed at White House functions, rendered honors for visiting heads of state, represented the Navy in joint service functions. They've memorialized significant moments in our history in wreath ceremonies at the Navy Memorial and at the Tomb of the Unknowns. They've rendered honors on behalf of the Chief of Naval Operations for visiting heads of foreign navies. They've marched in parades, and they've performed for hundreds of thousands of people across the country and around the world. And they have with pride conducted the solemn task of laying to rest our fallen shipmates. They've marched in every presidential inaugural parade since Franklin Delano Roosevelt's first. Over the last decade, this unit of just over 200 sailors has conducted an average of 1,100 ceremonies and 1,300 funerals every year. The precision, the discipline, and the military bearing required of these sailors is remarkable. What's even more remarkable is that 90% of the sailors in this command are 18 to 24-year-old E3s straight out of boot camp. And these sailors represent our Navy and our nation during some of the most significant moments in our history. So let's take a look at some of the moments in the history of this exceptional unit of Navy men and women. Through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Washington, D.C. saw many significant historic events. From visiting foreign delegations, Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade in 1905. In 1912, the remains of sailors and Marines killed aboard USS Maine in 1898 were brought to the Washington Navy Yard for transportation to Arlington National Cemetery. The next year was Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. In 1921, an unknown service member who'd been killed during the First World War was returned to Washington, D.C. aboard USS Olympia for transportation to a new tomb at Arlington National Cemetery. There were regular Navy funerals at Arlington during this time, and then larger events such as the state funeral for President Warren Harding in 1923. All of these events required Navy ceremonial support. To perform in these events, sailors from the receiving station at the Washington Navy Yard were called upon. Some of these sailors were transient personnel between duty stations, others were attending schools at the Navy Yard. So there was no dedicated group of sailors to be able to conduct these missions, which made the Navy look a little bit less crisp than the Army and the Marine Corps, who both by this time had dedicated units of personnel to perform in ceremonies. In 1931, the Washington Navy Yard experimented with the idea of a dedicated unit of personnel to perform in ceremonies and funerals. In 1933, it was established as a permanent unit with the name Navy Ceremonial Guard. And here is the earliest known photograph of the Navy Ceremonial Guard in 1933 as they pass in review on Pennsylvania Avenue before the newly inaugurated President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1935, the name of the unit was changed to the Seaman Guard, which was a generic name for security force units at all major Navy bases. What made this one different was its specialization in ceremonial duties. Seaman Guard sailors were called upon to perform at significant events, such as the 1939 visit of King George VI of the United Kingdom. Throughout World War II, Seaman Guard sailors conducted guard duty at the gates to the Washington Navy Yard, rendered funeral honors, and performed in ceremonies both at Arlington National Cemetery and at the Washington Navy Yard itself. In 1945, a new officer reported to the Seaman Guard, Lieutenant Biagio Furnari. Furnari's story was an amazing one. Furnari had 3 ships sunk out from underneath him. Yet he survived all of these. He applied for and was given a commission as an officer, and from 1946 to 1948, Lieutenant Furnari served as the officer in charge of the Seaman Guard. The Seaman Guard continued to perform in funerals and ceremonies, such as this one for Secretary of the Navy Forrestal in 1947. A new staff petty officer reported to the command in 1948, Gunner's Mate 2nd Class Delbert Black. GM2 Black led junior sailors in ceremonies and funerals, and it was during this tour of duty that he met his wife, a fellow sailor who was stationed on the same base. In 1967, Black's career reached its pinnacle when he was selected as the first Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. The 1950s brought some changes to the command. In 1951, the name was reverted back to its original name, the U.S. Navy Ceremonial Guard. In the early 1950s, a 24-man drill team was established within the Guard. And 1953 saw the return of an old friend, now Lieutenant Commander Biagio Furnari, who reported for his second tour of duty as officer in charge of the Navy Ceremonial Guard. Here you can see Commander Furnari at the front of the funeral escort for a full honors funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. In honor of his service, the barracks, dining facility, and gym for the Navy Ceremonial Guard are named Furnari Hall. Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors would participate in some significant events in 1959. In April of that year, President Eisenhower signed an executive order establishing the flag of the United States Navy. Days later, Seaman Jim Ronan of the Ceremonial Guard would be the first person to carry the Navy's colors. August of that year would see the huge special full honors funeral for Fleet Admiral William Bull Halsey, one of only 4 five-star admirals in the history of the U.S. Navy. 5-star funerals from any service were always done as a joint service ceremony. In this, Seaman Jim Ronan became one of the only people ever to carry the personal flag of a fleet admiral. And Seaman Gordon Drumheller would serve as the senior casket bearer for the casket bearer team. 50 years later, in 2009, Ronan and Drumheller returned for a visit to the Guard, and I took them out to Arlington National Cemetery and took them to the site of Bull Halsey's grave. Guard duty, funerals, and ceremonies continued to be the norm for the Ceremonial Guard into the early 1960s. Here in 1962, you can see President Kennedy leading British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan past the Navy Ceremonial Guard contingent of the Honor Guard for the formal arrival ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base. Sadly, in November 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated. The Navy Ceremonial Guard would be called upon to perform one of its very primary missions, that of state funerals. It's custom for state funerals that if a president had served in a particular branch of the armed forces, that branch would carry the president's personal color. Since John F. Kennedy had been a naval officer during World War II, this role fell to the Navy, and particularly to Seaman Apprentice Edward Nemeth. President Kennedy's funeral was seen by millions on TV. The image of a lone sailor, Seaman Nemeth, marching behind the caisson with the president's flag, and the image of Kennedy's young son, John Jr., saluting his father's remains, are some of the most iconic in history. One of the other members of the Guard to perform a significant role in Kennedy's funeral was Seaman Apprentice Larry Smith, who served as the senior casket bearer. Both of these sailors, both E2s, received Army Commendation Medals for their performance, which was almost unheard of in that day and age. The following year, in 1964, the Guard would perform in yet another state funeral, this one for President Herbert Hoover. Now, an interesting piece of trivia here, Ed Nemeth, who had carried President Kennedy's flag, when he left the command, he handed down his dress shoes to another ceremonial guardsman. That sailor, Seaman Charles Renner, would participate in President Hoover's funeral. Thus, the same pair of shoes was worn by two different Navy ceremonial guardsmen in two different state funerals. In July 1967, the aircraft carrier USS Forrestal was off the coast of Vietnam conducting combat operations. Because of an electrical glitch in a rocket aboard one of the planes on the flight deck, the rocket launched accidentally and struck the fuel tank of another plane on the flight deck. This triggered a chain reaction of fires and explosions of ordnance that would last for 14 hours and ultimately claim 134 lives. It would be the somber duty of Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors to conduct their funerals. Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors would participate in the state funeral for President Harry S. Truman in 1972, and the following year, 1973, President Lyndon Johnson's funeral. And as President Johnson had been a naval officer during World War II, it would once again be the privilege of a Navy Ceremonial Guard sailor to carry the presidential color. In 1975, the Navy celebrated its bicentennial anniversary. A ceremony to honor the occasion was attended by President Geerald Ford, whom you see here reviewing the sailors of the Navy Ceremonial Guard at the Washington Navy Yard.
It gave me a tremendous amount of confidence in dealing with other people. This organization is so much in the making of history, with the president taking the oath of office to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I think any young recruit coming here would be equally as proud to be serving directly, going out and doing ceremonies for the President of the United States. It's a great honor.
In 1982, Senior Chief Aviation Machinist Mate Kevin Kimsey reported for his second tour of duty with the Navy Ceremonial Guard. Kimsey was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, the highest award the Navy gives for heroism not involving combat. Kimsey was selected as the Navy's 1983 Shore Sailor of the Year. Sadly, 4 years later, Senior Chief Kimsey would die in a helicopter accident. The Navy Ceremonial Guard honors his memory with an annual leadership award. The truck bomb attack of the U.S. Marine headquarters in Beirut on October 23, 1983, would take the lives of 220 Marines, 18 sailors, and 3 soldiers. The Navy Ceremonial Guard would conduct funerals for 3 of the sailors. 2 of them, Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Nick Carante and Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Dave Worley, received full honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Nearby in Maryland, Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors conducted the funeral for Chief Hospital Corpsman George Piercy, who was my battalion chief. During the Iran-Iraq War in May of 1987, the frigate USS Stark was patrolling the Persian Gulf when an Iraqi jet fired 2 missiles at the ship. 37 sailors were killed in the attack. Here, Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors stand vigil over their fallen shipmates at Dover Air Force Base. On the Navy's birthday, October 13, 1987, Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors would take part in a much more upbeat ceremony: the dedication of the United States Navy Memorial on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. While the guided missile destroyer USS Cole was in Aden Harbor in Yemen refueling in October of 2000, a small boat manned by Al-Qaeda terrorists sped toward the ship and attacked, blowing a huge hole in the side. 17 sailors were killed, another 39 injured. Once again, Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors would be called to Dover Air Force Base to conduct the dignified transfer of the remains of their fallen shipmates. From the late 1990s to 2001, electronics technician second class Brian Moss served as a staff petty officer with the Navy Ceremonial Guard. He was the petty officer in charge of the training platoon, and he also participated, as does all the staff, in ceremonies. By the end of summer 2001, Petty Officer Moss had completed his tour and transferred to new duty at the Pentagon. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Petty Officer Moss was on duty in the Navy Command Center in the Pentagon. This was the exact impact point of the hijacked jet. Petty Officer Moss lost his life in that attack. He's buried just a few hundred yards away in Arlington National Cemetery. The Navy Ceremonial Guard honored his memory by naming the space used to train new sailors reporting to the command as Moss Hall. President Ronald Reagan died in 2004. During the plans for his state funeral, it was discovered that his casket weighed over 700 pounds. Because there are so many steps leading into the Capitol, and because the casket was so heavy, a bier was placed on the landing halfway up the steps. One team of 8 casket bearers, joint service, carried the president's remains halfway up, placed it down, and stepped off. A second set of casket bearers then carried the president's remains into the Capitol Rotunda. Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors continued to perform in a variety of different kinds of ceremonies, including this 2006 state dinner at the White House for Australian Prime Minister John Howard. The state funeral for President Geerald Ford was held in January 2007. As he had been a naval officer in World War II, once again, the personal color bearer would be a sailor from the Ceremonial Guard. An additional custom with state funerals is that although casket bearer teams are joint service, the firing party that fires the 3 volleys is always of the same service. And in this case, since he was Navy, it was a Navy firing party. Funerals at Arlington continue to be a mainstay for the Navy Ceremonial Guard. The size of the funeral escort is based on rank, and in this 2011 funeral, you see the funeral escort for a captain. This particular funeral was my dad's. Astronaut Neil Armstrong, the first man ever to walk on the moon, died in 2012. His final wishes were to be cremated and to have his ashes buried at sea. As he had served as a naval officer, the Navy sent a Ceremonial Guard firing party and casket bearer team to conduct the honors aboard the guided missile cruiser USS Philippine Sea. In 2002, the turret of the Civil War ironclad USS Monitor was retrieved from the ocean floor. Inside were found remains of 2 sailors who had perished with the ship when it sank on New Year's Eve, 1862. In March 2013, the Navy Ceremonial Guard conducted a full honors funeral with 2 caissons and 2 casket bearer teams for the remains of the sailors of the Monitor. Here are some scenes showing the inspection of the Honor Guard and the gun salute rendered during a 2016 Chief of Naval Operations arrival ceremony for his counterpart from a foreign navy. A few decades ago, a personal flag was created for recipients of the Medal of Honor. In 2016, Navy Ceremonial Guard sailors performed a formal ceremony at the Pentagon to fold and present the Medal of Honor flag to Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator Ed Byers. 2 years later, they would conduct the same ceremony for Master Chief Special Warfare Operator Britt Slabinski. Periodically, the Navy Ceremonial Guard has VIP visits. In 2017, actor Gary Sinise, whose father had served in the Navy, visited the Ceremonial Guard. In 2018, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral John Richardson, stopped to visit the Guard as he presented the command with its 6th Meritorious Unit Commendation. President George Herbert Walker Bush passed away in 2018, requiring yet another state funeral. As he had served as a naval officer in World War II, once again his personal color bearer would be a sailor, as would his firing party team. State funerals involved many ceremonies in many locations over a number of days, so the entire command, every sailor in the command, took part in one way, shape, or form. Here, early in 2020, we see a Chief of Naval Operations arrival ceremony for his counterpart, the head of the Australian Navy. This inclement weather version of the ceremony is held inside the National Museum of the United States Navy in front of the mast of USS Constitution. In 2020, the COVID-19 outbreak reduced or eliminated almost all ceremonies in which the Navy Ceremonial Guard participates. That is, except for funerals. While funerals continued at Arlington, between March and June, they were just the simple honors variety, where you just had casket bearer team and a firing party and a petty officer in charge. In June, the Army 3rd U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard, said it would resume caisson operations for more senior personnel. However, they asked that the escort be of a very small footprint, so no band, no multiple platoons. The escort formation that the Navy Ceremonial Guard adopted was a commander of troops, a guidon bearer, a drummer from the U.S. Navy Band, and a national color flanked by 2 riflemen. Each of these personnel is 6 feet apart.
Check back soon for more content. Thanks for watching.